Hey techies, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm gonna guide you step by step how to implement a change password process from scratch. And mainly in a secured API, you might need to change the password for your current user or for any user. And you've been asking for this video since quite some time, and now comes the answer. Before we start, I would like to invite you, if you're new to my channel, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up so we can help this video reach more and more people, and in this way we will share the knowledge, and as you know, sharing is caring. Before we start, I would like to announce that lately I released a new Spring Boot in-depth that will help you master the Spring framework. So this course covers everything from Spring Core, Spring Beans, dependency injection, services, DTU pattern, and so on and so forth, coming to testing. And for testing, you will learn how to test services, controllers, and everything using Moki 2 in order to have an isolated unit testing, and also how to implement testing using the Spring context. And in this case, you will be learning how to write end-to-end testing for your application. And also, I'm offering for my best followers 30% discount for the first 500 students. So don't miss the opportunity. You will have the link in the description of this video. So with no further ado, let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is to create a new controller under the user here. So let's call it user controller, where we will have our endpoint for changing the password. So this endpoint should not be under authentication, since the authentication controller or this auth endpoint is public and can be accessible by anyone. So otherwise you need to check and modify your security configuration just to authorize the register and the authentication or authenticate endpoints in the auth controller. But let's make it easier. So the first thing I will need is my user controller. So this is my controller, and then I can just quickly copy these annotations from here. So I will need my REST controller annotation, request mapping, and required args constructor. And here I will make it users. All right. So then with that, we need, of course, to create a user service. So I will just here do private final user service. Let's call it just service right here. And since we don't have this class, let's go ahead and create it. So we will create it under the same package. And here, of course, we need @service annotation. And of course, we need the required args constructor just to automatically inject our dependencies. All right, after that, let's go back to our user controller and let's add the endpoint that we will use to change the password. So it will be public and then response entity. So I'm going to make it full screen. So response entity, and let's make it of type anything for now. And here, let's say update or change password. So for this change password, we need to get or to request a parameter. So here you can make it whether a post mapping or also a patch mapping, since we are patching the user. And here we need an object. Of course, we need our request body, and then we need an object of type change password request. So this will hold the information of changing the password. So let's call it request just as a simple name. And then we need to create this object right here. So let's create a class change password request. Let's leave it empty for now, and we will go back and fill it in few moments. Then all I need to do is to do my service dot change password. And this one will take as a parameter the request, since we don't have the method yet. So let's go ahead and create method change password and of type void, since it's also okay to leave it as a void. So now if I go back here, our controller is ready, and all I need to do is return new response entity dot accepted, for example, dot build. So this is just to tell the final or the end user that the request was accepted, or you can also return OK to have a 200 as a response. So it's up to you. The next thing is we need to go to this change password request object, and then we need to fill it with, or like we need to request the information that we will need to change a password. So for changing a password, what we need to do is to ask the user to provide the current password. All right. So we need this current password to make sure that the user already knows his password or the current password and he wants to change it. Okay. And then we need a private string new password. So this is the new password that the user will type or he wants to change it. And finally, we need also a private string confirmation password. So we need to make sure that the user did not make a typo when changing his password. So let's ask for also a confirmation password. And of course, we need our getter and setter, and I will need also the @builder annotation. So builder. So for like this, we have this object already ready to use, and we have our controller also ready to use. All we need to do next is to implement this one or this method in this service. All right, so now what we need to do, we need to know we are changing the password for which user. And for this one, you might ask the question why I didn't request the user ID from or like inside our change password request. So we don't need that since this endpoint is already, so this one, let me go back to the controller. So since this endpoint, this one right here, is a secured endpoint. And when the endpoint is secured, this means that we can get the connected user. So what we can do here in order to get the connected user, we can inject or ask Spring to inject an object called principal. Okay, and this one we can call it connected user. And then we need to pass this one to our change password method. So I will pass connected user and I will ask IntelliJ to add a second parameter. And now in order to get the connected user from this principal object, and this principal object is an interface, so this interface represents the abstract notion of a principal which can be used to represent any entity such as an individual, a corporation, and a login ID. So this is the most interesting part for us right now, which is the login ID or the connected user. So now the first thing that we need to do is to get our connected user, or just var user equals, and then from this connected user object, we can get the principal, and then we can cast it to a user, and then we have our user object. And in order to do that, so here, let me show you. And here, when you do connected user.get, you will have get name, just get name. But in order to make this one available and to get more information, we need to cast it to an object of type user name password authentication token. So if you remember, this class right here is the one that we set when we connect the user in our authentication filter. So here I will cast my connected user, and then when I do get, we have get principal. All right. So now I need again to cast this object, this whole object. So just cat it, parentheses, and then the first parentheses is because I want to cast this user to my user from the package com.alibu.security.user, and then space, and I will paste the block of code that I just copied right here. All right. So now just semicolon, and we are done. So I also can remove these extra parentheses. So I'm just casting this object right here, this get principal that I'm getting from the username password authentication token. I'm casting it to the user object. All right. So now the next step is, first I need check if the current password is correct. All right. The current password is correct. How can we check that? Since the password in our database is already encrypted, but the password that we will receive is a plain text. All right. So in order to do that, we need to inject our private final password encoder. So let's call it password encoder. And now in order to check if a password matches the the encrypted one, so or if a plain text already matches the existing one or the encrypted password in the database, all we need to do is this one, password.matches. So here, as you can see, it takes two parameters, and the first one is a raw password and the second one is the encoded password. All right, so here what we need to do, so password encoder.match or matches, and what we need to get, the first one is our object request.get current password, and the password or the user password which we will get from our user object. All right, so now let's cut this one and do if not. So if it doesn't matches, so if it doesn't match, so if the two passwords are not a match, or the current one is not exactly the same one that we have persisted in our database, so all we need to do is just to throw a new, let's say, illegal state. I know it's not the best exception, but just let's say a legal state exception with a message wrong password. All right, so now I will not be handling the exceptions, but you can check my exception handler or the exception handling video on my YouTube channel, and you will get how you can handle all these exceptions. All right, so in case the password does not match, we will throw an exception and we will block the update of the password. The next, what we need to do, we need to check if the new password is the same as the confirmation password. So again, if, and I will start with not, if request dot new password dot equals, so if it's not equals to the request dot confirmation password. So if these two passwords are not the same, I will just do the same here, and I will throw a new illegal state exception. And as I mentioned before, a legal state exception is not the best exception, so we can create our custom exception and throw a better exception. So change password exception, for example, and here let's say passwords are not the same. All right, finally, if I pass these two conditions, all I need to do is to set user.setPassword, and then my password encoder dot encode my request dot new password. All right, so you can use whether the new password or the confirmation, since both of them are the same. And then all I need to do, I need to call my user repository. So I will do private final user repository, and I will call it repository as a short name. And the final step is to do repository.save. And then I need to save my user object. All right, and in this way, we have our password will get changed. All right, so here check if the current password is correct. And now check if the two passwords, the two new passwords are the same. All right, now last step is just update the password and finally just saving the password. So here save the new password and update the user. All right, so now this is it. Let's move on and let's implement, or let's write some tests for this one. And in this case, we will also be using the HTTP from IntelliJ. So let's go ahead and do it. Now for testing all this process, I will go to our HTTP folder right here, and I will create a new HTTP file, and I will call it change password. So in here, I will just create all the necessary queries we need in order to test this flow. So first I will start by copying all this. So we need to register a new user, and then we will just want to make sure that everything is working fine. So I will just copy this one and paste it in here. So the first thing that we will do is we will create a user, and let's give it the email just alibu@mail.com. And then what we need to do, we need next here. So here change the password. So let's change the password here. So in order to change the password, I need to do or to perform a patch request, and I can also copy this URL from here just to be a bit faster, and then /users, since our endpoint is users, and then we need to specify the content type since we have a body. So it will be application/JSON, and then don't forget to pass the authorization. So it should be of type bearer token, and then we can use the same auth token that we have right here. So this is our auth token, the one we stored before. And now we need to pass the body of our request. So the body, let's go here to users and then change password. And now I will just copy these 3 fields, and now I will put them in here. All right, so this is my body. Now I will just make it as a string, and then I will provide the values. So now the current password is password, as we know from here. And then we have our new password. I will make it new password. And finally, I will confirm with new password. So this is the request for changing the password. Then all I need to do is to query again my application to check if everything is working. So now I will just copy this one. So I will use it, just copy, not cut, and I will use it later on. So after changing the password, to make sure that this new password was taken into consideration, all I need to do is to perform a login again. All right, so here, login again and update the token. All right, so here all I need to do is a post again. So what I will be doing, I will copy this one since I know it's the same request. And here, instead of register, I need to call the authenticate endpoint. And I know that my authentication request contains only username and password, or the email and the password. All right. So now once I have the response, I want to do or to copy exactly this same line, and I will paste it afterwards, and I will call it here new token. Okay, so this is the new token that I will be using later on to perform or to call this demo endpoint. So I will copy this one again, and I will put it at the end. So query the demo endpoint after password change. And here, make sure that you use the new auth token. All right, so this new auth token is referencing to this one. So now if the process goes fine and everything is okay and the password has been changed, what will happen? So all these requests will go green, and then I will show you in case something went wrong, or for example, just to make sure that the password was correctly changed. But here we just missed one thing. Here, this one needs to be new password instead of password, since we changed it to new password. All right, so now let's go ahead, click on this one, and let's run all the tests. Okay, that makes sense because we did not start the application. All right, now our application is up and running, and I can run again my tests. So as you can see, everything is green, and we can also double check to see that we have now. So we see that we have 200 in here. So let's start from scratch. So the first one is registering, so we have a 200. The next one is querying the demo controller, which is this one. All right, and after that we have the change password. So we are patching, as you can see it's a patch, so to change the password, and we have 200. Afterwards we have the authenticate, and here you can see also the result or the response, which is already stored in this JSON file. So you can see the access token and the refresh token. And finally, we have our get endpoint. When we click on it, we will see the response from the secured endpoint. All right. So now let me show you how to make sure that the process, for example, if the process doesn't go correctly. So I will just add a few things here. So I know that this is a wrong password, or even if I use the old password, also it should not work. So we can try with both. I will restart the application, and then I will rerun these requests. So now the application is up and running, and if I run again, so you see now that this post request did not go well. So the authenticate did not go well because we have a wrong password. All right, so this one also responded with 403, but just no exception happened. That's why it was checked as green. But as you can see, the response code is 403, means that the user was not authorized to access this endpoint. So now let's do the final test. I will use password, which is the old one. So now I know that the user has this new password. Okay, I will restart the application. So my application is up and running. So now if I use here the old password, also the same should fail. So let's rerun again. And now we see that the authenticate also did not go well, and we have this 403. But finally, let's double check it. And if I use again my new password, now everything should go fine. All right. So I will restart again the application and rerun this test. And now we see that we have everything is green, and the authenticate, we have the response, the same for the demo, and so forth.